Hello, hello. All right. I've got back in not long ago to have lunch, and yeah, I've just writing down some notes and things and having a ponder about this and that. Yeah, after finishing reading this one, Ethics and the Limits of Philosophy, and there's a part in it where it's talking about morality and obligation, which is really interesting. I found um, talking about the an amoral person that it's a waste of time to try and make someone to argue for to argue from an ethical position for someone who doesn't think in an ethical manner or someone who has no morals, which is kind of ironic considering that what I was saying previously, that I believe it's immoral to be moral and unethical to be ethical. But at least I have a so-called ethic, even though I think it's unethical, if you know what I mean. Anyway, um, let me just. I wrote a ton of nonsense. I just want to sort of briefly try and articulate these ideas a bit better. So the basic premise, the basic question, as mentioned before, it's like how should we live our lives, aka Socrates via Plato, and I started thinking about this from the perspective as the problem of self-interest, and because when it comes down to it, again, I got involved in a little bit of a chat on Twitch with some philosopher who's talking about this, that, and the other. And he was sort of saying that he was, you know, how much money would you rape someone for, or something? Someone asked him something ridiculous like that. And then I sort of posed the question to him. He kind of tried to avoid it. It looked like for a while. I posed a question like, if the only way to save the entire human race was to rape someone, which he finds the most repugnant thing ever, more than murder, he said, then yeah, he sort of put it as in the pinnacle of crime, so to speak, most despicable thing to do. And so I said, well, if it came down to saving humanity and you had to rape someone, and therefore your life would be destroyed and everyone would know about it, and you have to live out your life basically viewed upon as this kind of absolute scum piece of low life, and they would never know that what you did saved the whole human race. Would he do it? And he said, probably not. And I also sort of said, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think I could do it either. But my kind of perspective, again, the whole point about saying what you would do publicly, I always think that's a lie anyway. But I also said after it goes, yeah, because I don't think I could live the pain and the suffering. I'd have to suffer a lifetime in order to save humanity and carry out an act which was, yeah, let's face it, despicable. So, but I'm then putting my own interest, my self-interest, over the entire existence of the human race. So I think I should, in that situation, I should do this despicable act. I think I should, but obviously I wouldn't want to do it, and it would be horrific for me and for the person involved, obviously. But I think it basically comes down to how, if you don't do it, then you're sort of saying humanity's not worth it. But then again, the other argument will be, can saving humanity in that way, therefore humanity does not deserve to exist. I don't quite see how that works out. People do plenty of horrendous acts on other people in order for the so-called greater good. But anyway, I was kind of mulling that sort of thought over as well, and I was just reading through the commentary by someone else at the end, by who is it by? Forgot his name now. Some other famous guy. Who is it? Oh, by A.W. Moore. He's wrote some commentary back, and I was just sort of skipping through this and like just trying to get to grips with the text a bit more, because yeah, you can't just read something like this once and absorb the damn thing. But yeah, so then I started thinking about self-interest and altruism, and then I was kind of thinking, well, when you when you sacrifice yourself for some reason, which people say, a noble act, a courageous act, where, you don't expect any kind of reward from it. Maybe you sacrifice your life, you die. But that's still self-interest, because you're doing it to keep alive whatever you deem to be worthwhile. So you're acting in self-interest. It's not really, altruistic. It just happens to be altruistic. I don't think someone can do something without any, without having a dog in a race, so to speak. And the whole thing that Williams was talking about with like moral obligations, he's sort of saying that morality, like philosophy has nothing to say about morality, but you can have moral. Yeah, he wasn't talking about a moral philosophy though. He's talking about something different, which I didn't quite get at first here. And like someone who is amoral, like with the trolley problem, some people with the trolley problem, they say, I just refuse to take part because it's meaningless to me. It's stupid. And then it's like, well, I can kind of see that point of view a bit better. And you'd say, well, if someone refuses to even tackle this problem, then they're being amoral, they're being unethical, even though it's a hypothetical. But they're saying they would act if they were there in that situation, then they just won't do anything. They literally say they won't act. And so his argument is saying there's no point in arguing against these people, but we need to explore. You need to explore this problem, as Aristotle said as well. We can't convince someone who is a sociopath why it's important. But even sociopaths understand the importance of understanding emotions because they need it to function in society. Yeah, let me just quickly clarify this a bit better. So sort of saying like a self-sacrifice is not any kind of real sacrifice if we feel fully justified in making the said sacrifice, which seems completely contradictory. So if you sacrifice yourself for a reason, then you think it's justified. You think you're justified to do this. So it's just repeating what I was saying. So there's no such thing. What the hell is that insect that's just flown in on the window? What the hell? Strange. I've seen them before. Big blue long insect thing. Quite pretty. Anyway, distraction. Let me just have a quick brief go over something. Yeah, so sacrificing ourselves for others is kind of a fallacy, because we're doing it for ourselves because we care about the others. It's for us, it's not for them. It's a very strange thing. It's like I remember saying this very when I was a very young age, like early teens. I used to go around saying that if you are absolutely 100% selfish, you then understand that you have to be selfless because you want your life to be better. Therefore, you're generally going to need other people around you, and you want them to be useful to you. So you want to make their lives good as well. So it's a selfish act to make society better because then it serves you. And if you put yourself in a perspective of, say, everyone followed your every single command, we would all kind of act like that in a way. But the world isn't like that. But everyone is kind of wanting some degree of that, some degree of power and capacity. I think it's got me thinking about Nietzsche as well, like the whole will to power idea. So let me just read through this a little bit. So if I was to give my life to save the whole of humanity, I'm really saving no one but myself. I'd argue, yes, my choice is basically tied to the continuation of what I hold as of value, or the closest approximation I can imagine in such a trade-off. So yeah, it's not really self-sacrifice. It's a kind of self-preservation. But what about immoral people? Those with no concern for ethical argumentation, pure rationalists, perhaps? Does it follow that such immoral persons do not act in self-interest? This seems unlikely. So I was just trying to see, like, because I'm acting in self-interest. Well, I'm trying to sacrifice myself, but I'm acting in self-interest. Therefore, if I'm trying to be the moral person, do the ethically what I think is the right thing to do, like how I should live my life. Whereas someone who's completely unconcerned with how they should live their life, the amoral, the unethical person, are they also acting? Are they not acting in self-interest? I guess this does come down to how we're going to be defining self-interest and self. It's something more to do with maybe sort of the Freudian, Jungian kind of ego idea. But let's not get too deep into that. But anyway, let's just say, so someone who is immoral and unethical is acting in self-interest. Someone who isn't is also acting in self-interest. But it then shows that the main difference between these, who is more aware? Is it the person who proclaims themselves to sacrifice themselves for certain reasons that they believe in? Or is it the amoral person who he's still going to preserve his ideas as best he can? It seems to me the only major difference here is that the amoral, the unethical, in this extreme example, they're not deluding themselves. Whereas someone who is ethical and moral, they are constantly, well, again, I'm not saying ethical or moral, but I'm talking about the altruistic kind of sacrifice. Sacrifice yourself for the good of the human species. They're doing that because they believe in the human species. They're preserving the idea that they believe in. Whereas if they didn't believe in that idea, it was something else. Again, they would maybe sacrifice themselves to save all the dogs and kill all the humans. Who knows? But again, that would still be a moral, ethical thing to do, but not altruistic, but helping a different species out. Anyway, so if they have self-interest, how else can he manifest it if not in ethical schemes? So the amoral, the ethical, unethical person. It seems they would direct their lives in terms of personal gains, completely detached from ethical gains. Maybe this is Nietzsche's will to power. I think there's some kind of parallel there between what he was saying. Yeah, in terms of pure self-interest, in pure self-interest, detached from ethics, it is clear that any given person will use others for their own means. It then logically follows that to preserve the best life and improve it requires others. Here we come to game theory. How acting in our own best interest requires negotiating with others and finding mutually beneficial grounds. So yeah, this is the thing. So yeah, some illusionary optimal benefit for ourselves, where everyone is in our command, is unachievable. So it is that moral people are irresponsible, selfish, and is it that moral people are irresponsibly selfish, and that amoral people are responsibly selfish? So in this situation, if you're being selfish and you're dismissing the idea of morals and ethics, you are actually being, in a strange way, ethical. You are holding on. You're saying, these are my actions. I'm standing by them. Whereas when you're saying you're doing, if you're the moral, the ethical person, you're saying, I'm doing it for this reason. Going back to sort of the virtual signaling kind of idea, but to a very subtle degree here. I mean, super subtle. It's when we're kind of saying we're doing it for another reason and detaching it from ourselves, so to speak, but we're not really fully in line and saying that oh, I'm doing this because I believe it is in the good, and therefore I'm doing it for my own self in a way to project myself into the future once I'm gone in some form or another. I think that's again, you could have a counter argument to this, which I've not actually thought about tackling yet, where you could be completely aware, you could be responsible, you could be moral and ethical and aware of this, like I've just said, and be responsible for it. But it's just, I guess, this is the battle with your will, with your desires, with yourself, and it's a constant struggle to figure out, everything you're doing is for yourself. So how am I fooling myself? Where am I going off track? Again, if you're under any kind of if you're in any kind of like state where you're kidding yourself, which we always are, then it's going to be problematic if you're trying to rationalize your way through a situation, weigh up the pros and the cons. If you can't see clearly, you're hoodwinked by your own kind of belief in being altruistic and self-sacrificing, whereas really you're not doing that. I think it's an important thing to look into. Anyway, does it follow that social beings that we are orbit a set of reasonably common desires and purposes, as well as instincts and thoughts? Yeah, I'm saying it does follow that. I think it's fair to say yes. We all have similar sets of base desires. Again, I'm talking, food, sex, heat, shelter, real kind of basic stuff. And our desires, our drives, our instincts that keep us alive and preserve us. And again, this does tie into the whole psychological idea of, it's a self-preservation and avoidance. If something's really difficult for us to tackle and it's going to cause us pain, if we can, we will try to avoid it quite often. And yeah, not just the physical pain, the mental pain. And this is the kind of thing where we need to possibly build up a certain amount of resilience. And this is where the hypotheticals can help out. So I believe, anyway. That's the way I view things. Anyway. So, yeah, therefore, we have these sets of beliefs. For a truly rational person, the ethics of the community lived in requires introspection and retrospection. So meaning we need to look in on ourselves, on how we interact with the community, and how we have interacted with the community, and how the community evolves and changes over time. And we can see this luckily through history. Like some things are bad, some things are good. This kind of cultural relativism idea and moral relativism, which it does seem to me there's certain core things which I mentioned before built into us, our key desires and such, and we have empathy. We see someone else struggling in pain, we feel for them. That is there. So there's that sort of base level grounding. Yeah, even a complete sociopath learns the required patterns of human emotions displayed by others, even if they do not fully comprehend them from an experiential perspective. Yeah, so I don't know if you know about this, but yeah, psychopaths, sociopaths, they will, even though they view people as objects, they understand and they get to learn how their emotions work, and they play these emotions because it's beneficial to them. They truly do have the self-interested heart. And it doesn't mean they're evil. We can say that they have no morals, but they understand the emotions. So there's also something going on between our morals and our emotions quite clearly. They play into and feed off one another. It's important to take into account as we move forward. They most certainly apply rational schema to their social interactions based on the do's and don'ts elicited from social interactions. Yeah, so they learn as children do, because children are like little sociopaths, but they learn how to adapt. But children go through a stage where they look at everyone else as objects, as I was mentioning before. They view themselves as the singular world. Now, so what it kind of comes down to, the problem of self-interest here is that it means that we are, the sacrifices we make, they're always for ourselves. But the problem within this is we act against our own self-interest in so many ways. And what seems to be the main thing, the main reason for doing this, it is fear. And I do have a big thing about fear. It is, I truly do believe that fear is an illusion. I remember there's this, oh God, what was the movie? It's not the best movie in the world at all. I think it's was it Earth, Back to Earth or something? It's like Will Smith and his son in it, where he's like fighting these aliens, and so he has no fear. And it's like, yeah, fear is an illusion, but danger is real. And it's like that single line is just like, oh my God, that is it. But we have this, obviously self-preservation, it makes sense, but yeah, the danger is real. The fear is there to tell us of the danger. But we've still got these sort of primitive, if you want to call them primitive, or essential instincts of fear. They alert us to the danger. But we are not often in control of our fears, and many of our fears are quite irrational. And again, this is where it seems to be that I'm edging more and more towards the idea of, like, when I'm saying ethics is unethical, morality is immoral, it's because it should be a rational, emotional progression and how we cope in the world and orientate ourselves in life. And yeah, any kind of sacrifice you make for someone, for your children, for your family, for your friends, for your dog, for the betterment of humanity, for your country, for whatever it is, just make sure and guard against it being a delusion. And it's something a lot of people seem to be bringing up a lot lately about, you know, the sort of teenage angst and existential crisis becoming more apparent in younger people. So I hear. Let's just say that, well, I think it's always been there, to be honest. I just think there's less kind of escapes from it, so to speak, or there's less kind of solutions. There's less coping mechanisms in place. I guess it's going back to the kind of the whole of this issue, Beyond Good and Evil, with Nietzsche. Oh no, it's a Genealogy of Morals. Wrong book. That one. Well, they're kind of combined. So anyway, that's just some thoughts there. And I'm going to keep this one shorter. I'll just cut it off there. But that's something to think about. And maybe I'll get back maybe later today, because I'm probably going to do a bit more reading on something completely different, actually. The 1960s, my God. And yeah, I might pop back on later and make another video, possibly. Otherwise, maybe next week. My wife told me to put a shirt on because no one wants to see me naked, apparently. No one wants to see my moobs. Well, anyway. Whoops. So I'm off. Bye-bye. Yeah, please, any comments, any suggestions, yeah, let me know. I'd love to get into deeper conversations with people about this. And yeah, I'm going to be making a blog fairly soon. Yeah, I might try and get that started today, but I really should do a bit more studying and stuff and reading. And yeah, I was also thinking of doing some podcast forms of things, maybe something a bit more structured, looking at particular things, particular books, particular ideas, because it is very helpful to learn to articulate ideas by speaking out loud about them, it does help a lot. So I found anyway. But I should probably just read what I wrote word for word, because I don't know why it is. It's something I'm going to look into psychologically, actually, see if I can find out what the reasons are for this, or neurologically. Like when I'm writing, I guess because I just take more time when I'm writing, a little bit more time. But I tend to be able to write and get the ideas out, and it makes sense. But when I'm speaking, I sometimes feel like it's like constipation in a way. It's a strange feeling. I was listening to something else someone was saying today in reference to Nietzsche, some interview, some guy talking about Nietzsche, and apparently he said he felt like he was Nietzsche felt like he was the pen. He was a pen, like something else was controlling him to write. They're using him, and his mouth was like, the fountain point, which is an interesting idea. Anyway, yeah. Latest. Bye bye.